fruit that yields seed. And the word for yield is two different words. One is yield is like seedify, and the other one is to yield as in like manufacture. So trees with fruit manufacture the fruit that have seed in them. And these grain-producing herbs that produce seeds themselves, they seedify. And so this idea that there's sort of a intermediary step of the production of fruit that exists that also has seeds in it. And so it's interesting because we have some things where the seeds are themselves the food, like grains. And then we have other things where there's fruit that has seed in it. And so both things are made by God, and we begin to get a classification system given by God to order the creation. And for man to come and realize that taxonomical systems where we get to name things are not things that we should simply invent without any sort of reason to it, but there's a reality of the metaphysical order that God has made, and that we are to use naming for the purpose of the organization and management of what God has made. And so this principle of coming in that God himself, in his own mind and declared by his own word, has given to us categories. The categories of being and the categories of naming, that God in his word has them overlap, touch, and be identical. And so he has provided, there's an order to the creation itself, there is an order in the mind of God, and there is an order in God's revealing to us an order of that creation. Orderliness, forming, God is very concerned with. And so we have these kinds. Now, this category of kind provides for us an orderly way of approaching the world. In philosophy, there is a problem called the problem of the one and the many. The problem is this: how do you differentiate unity and diversity? And what God does, God differentiates things. There's attributes that differentiate things, that provide lines of delineation. And then there are points of similarity when there are shared attributes. And so in the Middle Ages, one of the major projects was to create a hierarchy of being, trying to view God as the font or source of all being and the highest being. And then from there to think about other beings as they relate to God according to his law order and the metaphysical reality of how he made things, that their very nature was designed to fit into a particular purpose. And that is certainly true. Some of the problems come in when you try to have a multi-source basis for the hierarchy of being, as opposed to the idea that the Bible is the authoritative definer for us of the hierarchy of being. You begin to try to mix in something else. And so the mixing in of Aristotle's hierarchy of being was a significant part of the problem of the medieval effort to categorize. And we find actually that some of the early forms of that came back in even after the Protestant Reformation. In the 1700s, a man named Carl Linnaeus, who was a Lutheran pastor in Sweden in the 1700s, he loved botany. And as he studied plants, he began to try to categorize them, and he looked at the book of Genesis, and he saw this category of species, the kinds, and he thought, I'm going to try to categorize and discover these kinds. And so he begins to write an ordering system. He creates the system that we think of as the taxonomy system for modern use of organizing of creatures. And in fact, a part of his original system was the 3 domains that are used mainly now in parlor games: animal, vegetable, or mineral. That comes from him. Okay, so as the